Look closely at a modern assembly line, and you'll see thousands of precise, highly calibrated movements happening every second. It's a system designed for maximum output with zero margin for error. This chart shows the gross domestic products of European nations. At over $4 trillion, Germany's economy towers over its neighbors, ranking as the third largest in the entire world. But over the last 2 years, that massive economic machine has ground to a halt. In 2023, the country's GDP shrank by 0.3%, and it contracted again in 2024. The human toll is visible across the country's largest employers. Manufacturing giants like Siemens, Bosch, and ThyssenKrupp announced over 60,000 job cuts in the first 10 months of 2024 alone. While a typical downturn involves companies trimming costs until a recovery, this contraction signals a structural breakdown in the model powering German wealth for decades. The current crisis is built into the way the German economy functions. Understanding the path forward requires mapping the specific components that created this powerhouse. You can see the sheer financial scale of Germany's corporate giants right here in Frankfurt. This skyline houses some of the world's largest financial institutions and headquarters for massive multinationals. Yet those towering skyscrapers only represent a fraction of the economy. More than 99% of all German companies belong to the Mittelstand, a vast network of small and medium-sized enterprises. Around 1,000 of these family-owned businesses are what economists call hidden champions. They don't have the brand recognition of a major automaker, but they quietly dominate highly specific global markets, producing specialized components that the rest of the world relies on. When you combine the massive capital of the global giants with the specialized parts from the Mittelstand, you get an ecosystem perfectly designed to manufacture complex, high-value goods, like these KUKA robotic arms. This intense focus on high-end manufacturing generates immense national wealth, but it also means the entire country's prosperity depends entirely on keeping those assembly lines running at full speed. This pie chart shows Germany's gross domestic product broken down by sector. Notice how industry accounts for nearly 30%, but this creates an export paradox. Building your wealth by selling to other nations means your economy is entirely dependent on foreign buyers. When domestic demand in China slows down, or a new administration in the United States threatens heavy trade tariffs, German factories immediately feel the squeeze. To maintain this export machine, Germany requires a constant stream of international customers and an endless supply of cheap energy to build the products in the first place. Keeping heavy industry and sprawling facilities like this BASF chemical plant operational 24/7 requires a staggering amount of power. For decades, Germany built its manufacturing strategy around one core assumption: access to cheap, imported natural gas delivered directly through pipelines. That strategy relied heavily on Russia. Over half of Germany's gas flowed through the Nord Stream pipeline across the Baltic Sea. When war severed that connection, cheap energy stopped overnight. Without that gas, manufacturing costs for everything from steel to fertilizer skyrocketed. Energy prices surged, driving inflation up to 8.6% by the winter of 2022. This sudden spike in production costs is exactly what forced factories to scale back, triggering the stagnation that defined the following years. The era of relying on cheap fossil fuels from the East is definitively over. Now the country has to completely rebuild its energy infrastructure without turning off the machines that power its economy. The government solution is the Energiewende, a massive state-sponsored mandate to transition to a completely renewable energy economy. This means replacing coal plants and gas pipelines with billions of euros of new infrastructure, like these massive offshore wind farms in the North Sea. The timeline is highly aggressive. The government plans to phase out coal entirely by 2038 and mandates that all new cars sold in the country must be zero-emission vehicles by 2035. But this transition is colliding with a second crisis. This population pyramid shows Germany's demographic shift, revealing a rapidly aging society and a birth rate that remains among the lowest in the world. As the older generation retires, the working-age population is shrinking. This leaves a critical shortage of the skilled engineers and technicians needed to build the new green infrastructure and support the growing number of pensioners. To fill that labor gap, the economy requires major structural adjustments, relying on high levels of net immigration to supply the workforce with new talent. Germany is currently caught in a forced metamorphosis. If it can successfully re-engineer its energy grid and solve its labor shortages, it will lay out the exact blueprint for how a heavy industrial economy survives in the 21st century.